Chuck Todd is NBC's political director and moderator of Meet the Press. Chuck, good morning. Good to see you. Let's start right there with John Lewis. I actually went back and yesterday was watching your interview with John Lewis around the time of Donald Trump's election. You were asking him if he was going to be able to work with Donald Trump. John Lewis has been called the conscience of Congress. You obviously covered him for a lot of years. Kelly covered him for a lot of years. What are we losing in Congress? What role did he play in that body?
Well, he was really, I would say, he was definitely, I think, Congress's spiritual leader because he had an ability to to touch people on both sides of the aisle. It was interesting to me how look, I think it was, the cynical side of me, some of these Republicans who would reach out to John Lewis were looking to brandish their own credentials or try to improve their own image. And it would hoping that sitting next to John Lewis or walking across the bridge with John Lewis would do that. And if John Lewis, he never cared what the motive was. If somebody was going to march with him, if somebody wanted to be educated with him and needed the photo op to go with it. And I guess that's what made him, I think, so beloved on both sides of the aisle is, as cynical as we all are in Washington, he never questioned the motives of others, even if the motive was obvious right in your face, because at the end of the day, I think he thought, you know what, it's one more chance to educate one more person.
Boy, as you say, is that rare in Washington right now. We're going to talk much more about John Lewis in just a couple of minutes with John Meacham. Chuck, let's talk about what's going on in the campaign right now. A new poll from the Washington Post out overnight shows a 15-point spread now between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. An NBC Wall Street Journal poll also had it in double digits. We had the demotion of Brad Parscale, the campaign manager for Donald Trump. And then yesterday we saw these tele-rallies where the president is on speakerphone talking to supporters. A far cry from those big sold-out stadiums in 2016. What is the state of the Trump campaign right now?
Oh, I think it's in dire straits right now. I think it's in a rough situation, and the question is does the president have the credibility to turn things around? There's time to do this, Willie. It's not an issue of time. But what is dragging him down are two issues that he just doesn't seem comfortable handling. One, obviously, is the virus. He continues to want to deflect leadership on this, punt it to the states. And then the other has been race relations. I mean, the two of them in combo clearly are pushing a group of voters away from him. We've noticed it. It's sort of right-leaning suburbanites, college-educated voters. You're starting to see a split even among Republicans, where those that count themselves as Trump supporters, as devoted as ever, but those that say they're supporters of the party over the president, there's a 40-point gap, Willie, between that group of Republicans and Trump Republicans on the handling of the virus. That is what's dragging him down. So there's time to do this, but the president has to change course. Is he willing to do that?
That'll be hard to do at this point, given the fact that he promised it would magically disappear, the coronavirus. And people see in their own lives, Republican and Democrats, that's not happening. Chuck, thank you very much. We, of course, will look for much more this morning on a special edition of Meet the Press, when Chuck takes an in-depth look at how the U.S. has handled the COVID crisis.